All right, so Deleuze. I know, cracking open a philosophy text, especially a PDF, can feel like, well, a chore, but trust me on this. This deep dive is going to be different.
It's about more than just sounding smart, though you definitely will after this.
Right. Like, imagine dropping Deleuze's name at a dinner party and actually knowing what you're talking about.
It's about seeing those everyday things in your life, like even those cat videos you mentioned, through a whole new lens.
Okay, I'm liking where this is going. But before we get ahead of ourselves, who exactly was this guy? Gilles Deleuze. I hear the name, I know he's a big deal, but beyond that.
So picture this. Mid-20th century France. Deleuze is wrestling with these huge questions, not just about philosophy, but art, politics, you name it. He wasn't afraid to get into the nitty-gritty of the world.
Not just some stuffy academic then.
Not at all. Deleuze gave us these concepts, these tools, to really pick apart our assumptions, you know? It's about building a new way of seeing things. He wasn't about giving you the answers, but changing the way you ask the questions.
All right, I'm intrigued. So the PDF mentions becoming versus being right off the bat. What's that all about?
It's a total mind shift. Think about how we usually define things. A chair is a chair, a tree is a tree.
Right.
Makes sense so far. But Deleuze wants us to think about the process, the becoming, not just what things are, but what they're turning into all the time.
Becoming. So the chair wasn't always a chair. It was once a tree, maybe in a forest somewhere, and someday it might be like firewood.
Exactly. Everything is always changing, transforming. Even us, we're not static beings. We're always in a state of becoming.
You know, thinking about it that way actually makes me feel lighter, less stuck.
That's the beauty of Deleuze. It's about seeing yourself, seeing the world as dynamic, always changing and evolving.
So less labeling, more becoming. I like it.
Right. And this whole idea of interconnectedness, of this constant flow, it leads us to another big Deleuzian concept, the rhizome.
Okay, rhizome. That one sounds a bit intimidating. Like, do I need to brush up on my botany?
It's actually pretty intuitive once you wrap your head around it. Think of the roots of a plant. Not like a tree with one big root, but more like grass or those crazy fungi networks underground. It spreads out everywhere with no real center.
Okay, starting to see where you're going with this. So not a hierarchy, more like a network.
Exactly. And that's how Deleuze saw ideas. They don't just follow a straight line. They shoot out in all these directions. They connect in these unexpected ways, forming this web of meaning.
So it's not just like A to B to C. It's more like I start with A, then suddenly I'm exploring F, which then reminds me of something about like Q, and somehow it all like connects back.
You got it. It's like the opposite of linear thinking. It's about following those unexpected connections, those detours, and finding surprising insights along the way.
Makes you think about how we consume information now, you know?
Yeah.
One minute I'm scrolling through an article about like, I don't know, climate change, and the next I'm watching a documentary about sustainable farming.
And that right there, that's pure Deleuze. It's about understanding the world as this fluid, dynamic, interconnected network.
Mind officially blown, and we're just getting started. Okay, hit me with another one. What else does this Deleuze guy have up his sleeve?
Let's talk about affect. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot these days, but Deleuze gives it a very specific meaning.
All right, I'm all ears. What's Deleuze's take on affect?
Okay, so imagine you're at a concert. Music's blaring, lights are flashing, and you just feel this surge of something. Before you even label it as excitement or joy or whatever, you feel it in your body, that raw, pure energy.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean, like a wave that just washes over you before you even have time to think about it.
Exactly. That's affect. It's not the emotion itself, but the intensity of the experience, the way it hits us on this like visceral level before we can put it into words.
Okay, this is fascinating. So it's not just about what we think or feel, it's about how our bodies experience the world.
You got it. And Deleuze argues that these effects, these raw, pre-emotional intensities, are constantly shaping how we see and interact with everything around us.
So we're not always as in control as we think we are, huh?
And that's just scratching the surface. Remember, this is Deleuze. We're just getting started. Ready for the next one? We got to talk about difference and repetition.
Honestly, the more we get into this, the more I'm realizing how little I actually know about how I think. Okay, repetition. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
You would think so, wouldn't you? But leave it to Deleuze to find a whole new way of looking at it. It's easy to fall into that trap of thinking about repetition as just the same thing again and again, like a broken record.
Ugh, tell me about it. Like that feeling when Monday morning rolls around again.
And again. Exactly. You nailed it. But Deleuze wants us to hit pause for a second and really look closer. He says even in those repetitions, there's always this subtle variation, this tiny difference that maybe we miss if we're not paying close enough attention.
Okay, now you've got me curious. How can something be, like, repetitive and different at the same time? That seems kind of contradictory.
Think about it this way. Think about a walk you do every day. Maybe it's your commute. Maybe it's your morning run, whatever. It's the same streets, the same buildings, right? But then some days, maybe the light hits a certain building differently, or you notice some new shop you've never seen before.
Or I'm in a completely different headspace that day, so even though it's the same walk, it takes on this whole new meaning. It hits different, as the kids say.
Exactly. You're getting it. It's those tiny differences, those little shifts in perspective that are huge for Deleuze. He's saying that repetition isn't static, you know? It's not this dead end. It's actually an opportunity for change, for whole new meanings to kind of bubble up to the surface.
So it's like that saying, you can never step in the same river twice.
Exactly. You got it. Each experience, even the ones that seem totally repetitive, they have this potential for difference, for a fresh perspective. And Deleuze argues that it's these tiny differences that actually drive creativity and change. Pretty cool.
Okay, yeah. Officially starting to see the world through Deleuze-colored glasses now. And I gotta say, things are looking pretty wild. Everything seems so much more dynamic, so interconnected.
Love it. That's a great way to put it. And speaking of interconnectedness, get ready, because this next concept might sound like a bit of a curveball. Ready for it. Body without organs.
All right, yeah, that one definitely caught my attention. It sounds a bit intense, to say the least. Like, is this some kind of sci-fi thing?
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that, but don't worry. Deleuze is not talking about, like, literally removing organs.
Okay, good to know.
It's more of a thought experiment, a way of pushing our thinking.
A thought experiment. Okay, I'm down for that. Walk me through it.
So try to imagine breaking free from all the limitations, all those rules about how we usually think about our bodies. You know, our organs, they have their jobs, our bodies have these limits.
Right, can't argue with that.
But what if, and stick with me here, what if we could imagine a body that wasn't confined by those pre-programmed roles?
Okay, so, like, a body that could breathe underwater. Or fly. Or maybe teleport.
Well, it's not really about having superpowers, though that's a fun way to think about it.
Right, of course.
The PDF actually uses the example of a playground.
A playground. Okay.
So think about how kids see a playground. That slide, not just for sliding, those swings, definitely not just for swinging. They can be spaceships, castles, whatever a kid's imagination can dream up.
So it's about looking beyond what we're told things are for. Breaking free from all those limitations we put on ourselves and just opening ourselves up to, like, infinite possibilities.
Yes, you nailed it. The body without organs is about tapping into that limitless potential, that freedom to create and experience things without all the baggage of how we think things should be.
So instead of just going through the motions, instead of just accepting the limits and saying, well, this is just how things are, Deleuze is saying we can tap back into that, like, childlike sense of wonder and possibility.
Exactly. And that ties in beautifully with another one of Deleuze's big ideas, the concept of desire.
Desire. Okay, now you're speaking my language. I definitely have a lot of desires. Most of them involve coffee and taking naps. But I have a feeling Deleuze's idea of desire is probably a little bit deeper than mine.
Well, you're not wrong. Deleuze sees desire as this incredibly powerful creative force. It's the thing that pushes us to connect with others, to explore the world, to constantly try to become more.
So it's less about the actual thing that we want and more about that energy behind it, that drive that propels us forward.
Exactly. The PDF uses the example of an artist who's totally lost in their work. It's not about finishing the painting, you know? It's that feeling, that joy of creation, that flow state where they lose themselves in the process.
Oh, I totally get that. Like when I'm writing and the words are just flowing out of me and I'm not even thinking about the end result. I'm just like completely in the zone, you know?
There you go. That right there, that's the Deleuzian concept of desire in action. It's about finding those experiences that put us in that flow state, that allow us to tap into that raw creative energy and just fully immerse ourselves in the process of becoming.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. I'm starting to see how all these concepts connect to each other. It's like Deleuze is painting this picture of a world where everything's in constant motion, where even just repeating something is a chance for something new, and where our desires, the things we want, they can actually be these powerful forces for creation.
And we're just scratching the surface, ready to see how these ideas play out in our everyday lives.
Okay, so we've been looking at the world through these Deleuzian glasses, and I have to say, it's pretty wild out here. But how do we actually take these big kind of mind-bending concepts and apply them to our own lives? Where do we even begin?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And something tells me Deleuze would love that you're asking it. He wasn't exactly known for keeping philosophy locked up in some dusty old book.
So no ivory tower for this guy.
Definitely not. He wanted people to use these ideas to put them into practice in the real world.
All right, so how do we take these Deleuzian ideas out for a spin?
Well, the PDF we've been digging into, it talks about how Deleuze's ideas have influenced so many fields, everything from art and education to even politics. But for now, let's stick with something we're all doing all the time, something pretty essential: learning.
Learning. Okay, now you're speaking my language. I am constantly trying to learn new stuff, sometimes more successfully than others, to be honest. But are you saying Deleuze can actually help me, like learn a new language or finally master that skill I've been working on?
Remember that whole rhizome thing we were talking about? That network of connections that's always branching off in these unexpected directions?
Right, not a straight line, more like a choose-your-own-adventure kind of path.
Exactly. And that's how Deleuze wants us to think about learning. Don't be afraid to go down those rabbit holes, follow your curiosity, even if it seems like you're getting off track.
So instead of getting frustrated when I hit a wall, I should look at it as a chance to discover something new, even if it's not what I originally set out to learn.
Exactly. Maybe the key to finally getting that skill is exploring something seemingly unrelated. It's about making those unusual connections.
It's like they say, the obstacle is the way, right?
There you go. And that same principle, it applies to creativity too. Remember that body without organs idea, that whole breaking free from our usual way of doing things.
Yeah, a playground example, right. Seeing possibilities everywhere.
Now think about how you can apply that to your creative work, whatever that looks like for you. Don't be afraid to experiment, to bend the rules a little, use your skills in new ways.
So, like, instead of getting stuck in that rut of the right way to do something, whether it's painting, writing, even cooking, I should be open to those happy accidents, those moments when you try something new and you're like, whoa, I didn't expect that, but I kind of like it.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to be surprised by the process. That's often where the real magic happens.
This is seriously making me rethink how I approach everything. It's like Deleuze is giving us permission to break free, to embrace change, to look at those moments of uncertainty not as failures, but as opportunities for growth.
That's a great way to put it. He reminds us that we're not fixed, we're not stuck in time, we're always changing, becoming something new, something more than we were yesterday.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I'm looking at the world, at myself, through a whole new lens now. And listeners, if you're out there feeling a little overwhelmed, like your brain just got a serious workout, that's a good thing. It means you're really engaging with these ideas. And trust me, it's worth the effort.
And remember, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole universe of Deleuzian thought out there waiting to be explored. Who knows what other insights are out there waiting to be discovered?
Exactly. So keep those Deleuzian vibes flowing, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.